Let's talk supply chain. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Talk Supply Chain. So let's get started with a question. Today's guest is a top truckload carrier and logistics provider. So, how many inspections do their team carry out every single year? Well, they have nearly 8,000 trucks, so you can work it out. Let me know your guesses over on social and keep listening because I'll let you know at the end of the show. So today I'm joined by a company focused on delivering multimodal solutions to help shippers get their goods delivered safely and on time. Founded in 1956, they combine best-in-class operations and innovation with technology and talent. And who's joining me today? Well, it's Werner. Werner is one of the largest truckload carriers in the United States with a diverse range of transportation services, from intermodal and cross-border transport to final mile and expedited services. Its multimodal solutions are built for businesses demanding precision, flexibility, and speed. And it's Lance Dixon, Senior Vice President of Mexico, Canada, and Temperature Controlled Operations at Werner, who is joining me for the show today. Now, Lance joined Werner back in 1992 and really grew within the company, holding managerial roles across a variety of business areas before taking on the VP role he's thriving in now. Today, Lance and I will be talking all about Werner, what they do, the biggest transportation challenges and opportunities in 2025, embracing the potential in cross-border, and how Werner is continuing to advance its suite of services to give companies a strategic edge. So, welcome to the show, Lance.
Thank you, Sarah. It's my pleasure to be with you today. Good afternoon.
Yes, I am so excited to have you here. Now, Werner has been going for nearly 70 years, and I get really excited when I see organizations moving forward at the same pace as the industry, right? Combining that heritage with innovation. It's great to see. And you've been with Werner for over 30 of those years, so you must have really seen it all. And I cannot wait to find out a little bit more about that. So, why don't you tell us about Werner? We're going to dive deeper a little bit later in the conversation, but give us an overview: who you are, what you do, and how you help your customers.
Yeah, so Werner's a full service transportation provider. I think we're known in the industry as being a truckload carrier, but we're really so much more than that today. We offer temperature control services, peer brokerage, and logistics services, intermodal services, and in Laredo specifically, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, but we do some cross stocking. And so I think that sets us apart from a standard truckload carrier, so to
Mhm.
speak, because we're kind of a full suite of services that we offer our companies. For me specifically, as you mentioned, I've been with Werner for quite some time, coming up on 33 years in January, so quite some time. The changes have been crazy. I started in LTL in 1989, worked in LTL for 2.5, 3 years, came to Werner, and I've been at Werner ever since. And then in 1999, I was tapped to try to help start our Mexico operation. And so I've been with that for 25 years now. And since then, I've had a few other responsibilities added on to me. I'm also, as you mentioned earlier, responsible for our temperature control service offering, which is reefers,
Mhm.
and Canada.
Awesome. Well, I love to hear that. I mean, everybody knows I am Canadian, but also cross-docking has been in my past. I know all about that. So I'm kind of excited that we're going to be talking about that as well. Mexico has blown up. So I'm sure that all of your responsibilities there have blown up with it, right? You've got a lot going on, I would assume, with that. And then also temperature control. I mean, cold chain. I don't know if we can get through a discussion without cold chain coming up, and it's popping up at a lot of different conferences like Manifest and TPM and all of that. Are you getting sort of that similar sense across all the lines that you are managing at the moment?
Yeah, all of them. It's an ever-changing, ever-dynamic world, and you referenced it earlier, but man, what a change since 1992 or three when I started at Warner. Holy cow, things are so much different. But yeah, across almost all those sectors, there's renewed interest in Mexico, specifically to the cold side of the business. Yeah, more rules, more regulations,
Mm,
probably good for society in general,
yeah.
but it's a chore to keep up on all of those for sure.
Yeah. And then all the technology, which I'm sure we're going to get into a little bit later, but that just adds another layer of complexity and trying to figure out which technology AI is now in the mix, driverless, trucks, if we get there, drones, like so much has changed. I mean, I started in 1998 and have seen a lot of that shift alongside you. Now, before we get into any of that, who are your customers, right? You work with a wide range of people, shippers, carriers, and I think across multiple locations. So, do you have an ideal client?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start at a very high level. So we're not really married to one specific product type or one specific sector, so to speak. And so we're kind of, it doesn't really matter to us if it's industrial products, retail products, automotive sector, doesn't really matter too much to us. Specific to Mexico, if you saw my customer list, you'd know 95% of the logos or brands. They're all multinational customers. They're
Mhm.
large customers doing business, not just in North America, but even outside of North America. And
Mhm.
so there wouldn't be too many surprises on that list. Again, be a few you'd say, I'm not sure who that company is, but generally speaking, you would know all the logos or 95% of the logos. So, in terms of the ideal customer, and again, specific to cross border,
Mhm.
I don't, I'm not going to name a customer, but I think it's just one that's open to multi modes of shipping, whatever's most efficient. If it's not time sensitive type of freight, we might be able to save some money on transportation costs if we could move that over to an intermodal type of move.
Mhm.
And so, you round all of that out. The ideal customer is just somebody that's flexible, somebody that wants to partner with us and just doesn't look at Werner as just a service provider. We want to
Yeah.
work together to solve these transportation and supply chains issues.
Yeah. And I think partnering with a team with all of that experience, right? There's a lot of experience on your team.
Yeah, for sure. 25 years of doing this cross-border stuff. We don't practice anymore. We're experts at this game.
Yes, I love that. I think I'm going to take that and use that as a tagline somewhere. I love it.
You are free to steal it.
Well, so you began your career with Warner back in 1992, which we mentioned earlier. Can you talk to us about how Warner has evolved over those 30 years you've been with them, but then also how you've seen kind of the industry change a little bit? I know we've spoken a little bit about it, but give me a broader overview of what you've seen.
Yeah, so as I spoke about earlier, specific again to Mexico, and then I'll touch the industry one, but specific to Mexico, what we started doing was simply dry van cross-border business.
Okay.
We did what was called through trailer service. So the trailer that loaded in Toronto, Canada,
Hmm.
was exactly the same trailer that unloaded in Mexico City,
Okay.
or the same trailer that loads in Omaha, Nebraska, and delivers in Mexico City. It's the same trailer. Um, Today, we do temperature control or reefer goods to and from. We do what we call pure brokerage, which is there's not a Werner asset involved in those moves at all. We hire a Mexican carrier on their trailer, they bring it to the border, we'll transload it at that cross dock that we've referenced earlier to an Alliance carrier trailer, and on it goes to final destination.
Huh.
Then we also have what we call power only, which is a Werner trailer asset, but a non-Werner truck on the front of it.
Hmm.
And that's also arranged and executed through our logistics arm. We do intermodal that we referenced earlier.
Hmm.
And then we use in the middle of that, we use this cross dock to augment capacity, whether that's trailer capacity or truck capacity on either side of the border, doesn't matter. We can use that facility to help augment capacity for our customers. And so that helps take the peaks and valleys out of the equation and makes
Hmm.
it much more streamlined for our customer.
Yeah, and so what have you seen over the last, I mean, obviously we've seen a boom within trade crossing the border, especially with Mexico over the last, I mean, I don't even know, what would you say, 5 years or so? Like
Yeah,
what has
or
been that
longer.
transition in the industry specifically throughout those 30 years?
Yeah, so I'll back up to, 25 years ago when we got started. NAFTA was the original document written in, I think, 92 or 93, implemented
Yeah.
in 94. And now we operate under a new document called USMCA. And so the USMCA document, for what it's worth, is a much better document than NAFTA. There were a lot of things in NAFTA that didn't exist and therefore didn't get included into the original document. And quick example of that is Amazon didn't even exist in
Mhm.
1994 when NAFTA was
Hard
implemented,
to think about that.
isn't it? And so there wasn't anything in there to address cross-border parcel business in
Right.
small quantities, right? And USMCA addresses that. And so generally speaking, USMCA is a much better document.
Mhm.
Through those years, um, nearshoring, and then the pandemic. I think the pandemic taught us a lot about how fragile long supply chains are. So there's
Mhm.
been this move since the pandemic to source closer to the end consumer.
Mhm.
And obviously, just because of proximity, Mexico and Canada fit that that footprint really, really
Yeah.
nicely. And Mexico a little bit more so, just simply because labor costs are cheaper in Mexico.
Mhm.
But aside from that, that proximity actually adds, more than just um, the physical location. I mean, it's easy to travel to Mexico. You can take a day flight from, just
Mhm.
about anywhere in the U.S., get to Mexico, do your site visit, and be back home.
Mhm.
If you were going to do that to a Pacific Rim country, I mean, they're 12 hours. They're on the other side of the globe. That's a whole week
Mhm.
of traveling just to do a site visit. So, and the um, time difference between the United States and Mexico, I mean, we're plus or minus 3 hours roughly with
Yeah.
Mexico.
Which
So
is the
you get
same.
same day communication.
Yeah.
So if you were going to try to communicate with somebody in China, for example, it's really the next day before they get that message, and then they answer you, and it's the next day before you get it. So a simple email could take 3 days to sort itself out. Well,
Mhm.
Mexico's pretty much on the same time zone, give or plus three, as I spoke about, and
Yeah.
so you get same day communication.
Yeah.
Um, and so it really speeds everything up. Aside from just how quickly stuff can move physically from the origin point to the destination point, you got all these other little intermediary things that speed up the whole process. You
Mhm.
think about China, it's 3 or 4 days to produce the product, a day or two to get on the vessel. Then you probably got 25 days on water, gets to Long Beach, California, for example,
That's if
day or
you're
two to get
lucky.
off. Yeah, a day or two to get off the ship. And then you
Mhm.
got your domestic US portion of that move.
Mhm.
Now take that same product coming out of Mexico, day or two to manufacture. You got a day transit to the border. Give it a day to get across. It doesn't normally take a day, but give it a day to get across. And you got 3 days of transit to just about anywhere in the United States. That whole
Right.
process took 5 to 7 days
Wow.
versus 35 or 40 days. So speed to market is important for our customers,
Mhm.
especially when they have an item that's flowing off their shelves on the retail side, flowing off
Oh,
their
for
shelves pretty
sure.
quickly. They need to replenish very, very quickly. And Mexico offers that opportunity for sure.
That is such a good point. And I wanted to get to that, right? Because we're at the beginning of 2025. What are some of the biggest challenges that Warner customers are facing? What are some of the key issues that you're helping them to tackle? Obviously, you've just mentioned one of them is turnaround time and being able to get product to consumer a lot faster. I think another thing that I wanted to mention is when you were talking about all the services that you have across the border as well, it's the options, right? You're also giving them a lot of options to be able to move that cargo. Sometimes security with trucking could be an issue or is on top of people's minds, but you also have the intermodal option as well. So, talk to us about some of those biggest challenges and how you're helping them to tackle that.
Yeah, it like we had mentioned earlier, dynamic world, right? I think the biggest thing, there's this northbound southbound imbalance with northbound volume outpacing the southbound. So there's a lot more coming into the United States than there
Mhm.
is from the United States going down.
Right.
This creates an imbalance. Nearshoring is going to exacerbate that problem.
Hmm.
And so how we solve that problem is a number of different ways. And we've touched on some of these already, but some areas in Mexico are more consuming than producing. So
Okay.
for example, the Mexico City region, there's 25 or 6 million people that live in that metroplex.
Hmm.
And so there's a lot more goods coming in and mostly consumer type of goods. And there's not as much manufacturing. So we have a bit of an imbalance there. We actually move those trailers to neighboring regions. So we'll move them up into the central part of the country that's called, we just reference it as the Bajío region. And
Okay.
so we'll move trailers up there so that we can meet our customers' northbound demand there.
Hmm.
We also augment that through intermodal that we just talked about. We augment that through loading Mexican carrier trailers and transloading in Laredo, Texas at our transload facility there to help augment capacity inside of Mexico. So we solved that problem through a number of different ways. And as long as customers are flexible and open to using all of these different modes, most of the time we can meet all of their northbound demands.
Mm.
And so that's what helps, I think, Werner set itself apart from many of the other transportation providers that are serving Mexico.
But I think the key point there too is that you need to trust your partner that you're working with and allow them the flexibility to be able to move it the way that they need to move it to get the product to you within the expectations that they have of you as
Yeah,
well.
absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Too many times I remember because I worked for a freight forwarding company. I was in the logistics side. I've been in the trucking side. And too many times they're micromanaging it just a little bit too much.
Hmm.
And then it causes delays and it causes all sorts of stuff that we could have potentially avoided by just being given the flexibility to make some of those decisions to get the product to where it needs to be.
Yeah, spot on. You nailed it.
Yeah.
I don't have anything to add.
Yeah. So on the flip side of that, what are some of the biggest opportunities your customers are looking to pursue? I mean, like you talked about already, we've seen a growth in nearshoring in 2024. That's kind of helped drive business in transportation sector. We're seeing that continuing conversation around leveraging customer experience for competitive advantage. What's your take on all of this? Is there an opportunity that's not discussed a lot that we should be thinking about?
Well, let me back up a little bit and I'll start with the nearshoring thing because I think it's a I'd be
Mhm.
remiss if I didn't talk about it just a little bit. So, what we're seeing right now with nearshoring is the companies that are already existing in Mexico,
Mhm.
they're ramping up. So it's pretty easy for those folks. They just have to hire a second or maybe a third shift and they can ramp
Got
pretty
it.
quickly.
Okay.
But for these new companies that are looking to enter into Mexico, this
Mhm.
takes a bit of time.
Yeah.
So if you look at foreign direct investment in Mexico over the last 3 years, it's hit a record every year. So the
Mhm.
monies are committed. It's going to happen, and it is happening. But we're in the very early stages or early innings, to use a baseball analogy,
Love that.
because they have to go out and they first have to decide, okay, where do I want to put my plant? Do I want
Mhm.
to put it in the northern part of Mexico? Do I want to put it in the interior of Mexico? There's a lot of things that play into that. They're looking at labor costs. They're looking
Mhm.
at energy
Labor,
costs.
well, also labor availability too. I didn't mean to
Yes.
interrupt, but like labor
No,
availability is a big one.
absolutely. Right. And so
Mhm.
they have to figure that out first. So that's kind of step one. Okay, now we know where we want to put the plant. So now we have to go out and secure a site. And then we have to begin site preparation. And then we have to pull in some infrastructure. So think, first off, roads,
Yeah.
water, sewer, electricity,
Mhm.
communication lines, those sorts of things. Then after they've got all that in, now we can start propping a building up. Now we've
Mhm.
got the building propped up. Now we need to put the machinery inside. Now we need to hire and train our
Mhm.
associates that are going to build the products that come out the back door.
Mhm.
All of that takes 24 months, 2 years in a efficient way. And
Right.
so that's why we're in the early stages of this.
Mhm.
I think this will probably take at least a full decade to play itself out completely. And I'm super excited to see where it's going to go. Um, Aside from tariff talks and all of that, I think the current administration understands exactly the how we all rely upon each other, whether that's
Mhm.
Canada and Mexico and the U.S. We rely heavily on one another for different product types and that. I don't think that's going to get messed up. I'm confident that it'll get worked out, and
Mhm.
there's just a lot of rhetoric around that right now. I don't think it's going to end up being a big deal in the long run. Um, the media seems to trump some of this stuff up, no pun intended, there a little bit, and so we'll see how all this plays out. But I'm confident it'll get worked out. Everything will be fine, and it'll move forward great.
And you're ready.
Yes.
You and your
Yeah.
team are ready. Warner's ready, right? That's what we're talking
Yeah.
about today. That's why we're here today because you're ready for this. You want companies that are looking at Mexico to know that you're in there, you have the options, you are ready to support them in what they need. But you're right, this doesn't happen overnight. These are things that take some time and take some planning, take some execution. You got to figure out where you're sourcing your raw materials from. How are those getting into Mexico, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think you're right with your prediction that it is going to take some time, but it's happening now. And as it's happening right now, you do need to think about who you're going to partner with and who's the right support for you going into that market and moving products into North America as well. So, I want to take a closer look at some of your cross border services because that is really your area of expertise. Last year, I had a growing number of conversations around the potential in Mexico, like we've been talking about. But as a Canadian, there's also huge potential up here. Now, can you talk a little bit about that and how you're helping customers? Because I think you transport more cross-border freight to and from Mexico than any other carrier. So talk to us about how all of that works, what that network looks like, and how does Canada fit in?
Yeah, Canada absolutely fits in. I mean, we primarily focus on, the GTA, Greater Toronto Area, Montreal. That's where the bulk of the population is. So that's where the bulk of our services end up residing also. We stick pretty specifically to cross-border or international shipments. We don't do any domestic Canada shipments, for example. So we're not competing against Canadian carriers in any sort of
Mhm.
direct way. But you're absolutely right, and specifically around the automotive sector. Canada is
Mhm.
huge in the automotive sector, and it's so important for just not only the Canadian economy but the U.S. economy to make sure that that trade is now not interrupted. We execute Canada a little bit different than we execute Mexico. In Mexico, we hand the trailer off to a Mexican carrier. They do all of the work inside of the country. In Canada, our trucks, our drivers are actually going into country
I've
and
seen
delivering the
that.
product. Yeah, and so it's executed a little bit different, but the nuances are the same. We have to always keep up on new Canadian law, new Mexican law, and
Hmm.
make sure that we're able to adhere to all of those rules and regulations and protocols around, cross-border international shipping.
Hmm.
It's complex, it's dynamic, it's challenging, but that's what keeps it interesting too. I mean, no 2 days are alike at Werner Enterprises, at least in my role.
I
It's
mean, no 2 days are alike for, I think, any supply chain professional. We all thrive on problem solving, right?
yeah, yeah.
It's kind of the thorn in our side, but also the thing that gets us up in the morning.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the things
Mhm.
that has kept me in the job and kept me interested in what I do
Mhm.
is there is no 2 days that are the same, and so it keeps my brain very active. It keeps my creative side very active because I'm trying to figure out how to solve some of these problems. If I worked in a job that was, just putting a widget in some sort of gadget everything that went by me, it would be so mind numbing for me.
Mhm.
And so it does take a certain type of individual to you know, to 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 embrace chaos much of the time, right? And be okay with it, right? It's okay that things
Yeah.
are a bit out of control and it feels that way, a bit out of control and chaotic and always problems and they're always stacking up. It seems like it takes a certain kind of individual to be able to thrive in that type of atmosphere. And it's
Yeah.
exactly what keeps me going. And it sounds like it's what kept you going in the past
Yeah.
also.
But not only that, transportation does not take any days off. I
No.
mean, let's just be fair.
Hmm.
So you have to have certain tendencies to be able
Yeah,
to be in transportation. I mean, I remember taking calls from truckers at like all times of the night because they couldn't get through the border and there was customs challenges and all sorts of stuff. And
never
even at
stops.
holidays, they don't take it off. And so there's a lot of transportation professionals working on those holidays to keep your products moving. And so we should
Yeah.
just give a shout out to all those people who help keep transportation moving.
Yeah, it's funny because I always try to tell my team, I don't think we always fully grasp how important
Hmm.
logistics and transportation is
Yeah.
to so many people. The problem is the people we serve, we never meet. And because we never get to meet them, we never get a thank you. So it
Right.
seems like a thankless job, right? But what we do, all of us collectively in logistics and transportation, is so important to
Yeah.
economies and societies. We feed people, we clothe people, other
Mm.
essential goods that they need every day. They just go to the shelf and it just magically shows up. There's a lot of hard work behind that by a lot of men and women, in the front line of the truck drivers,
Yeah.
and whether you're at Warner or someone else, a
Hmm.
great big thank you from me to you for the job that you do. I mean, they worked through the pandemic. They made sure that we got the products that we need, and those folks are important. I mean, to me,
Hmm.
They're as important as the farmers and ranchers that feed us.
Oh
They're
yeah.
as important as the doctors that keep us all healthy,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't get the respect they deserve.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with
Sorry for the rant.
No, 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 no. I'm glad that we were able to, just take a moment to really highlight and understand what it is to be in transportation and thank everybody because you're right. It can feel a little bit thankless sometimes. And it's up to you and I to be able to use platforms like this to be able to tell them that we do thank them for all the hard work and to showcase what it's like to get a product on your doorstep and how much is involved behind
Yeah.
that. So I appreciate that. And I'm glad that you brought that up. I do want to keep going in the conversation around Mexico though, because when I was researching for this particular episode, it showed that you established or Warner established its presence in Mexico in 1999. So you've gained a lot of knowledge and insights, best practices like we've already talked about, right? What specifically are some of the challenges that a shipper might face when shipping to and from Mexico? Because remember, right? You said it's going to take a decade. We haven't even seen half of the companies that are going to be moving into Mexico and the manufacturing and the transportation that's going to be coming out of Mexico yet. So there's a lot of things on shippers' minds, and I'd like to put that at ease by asking you what are some of the challenges they might face, and then also how would you help them address those obstacles too?
Yeah, I think that the challenges are going to be many and great. Let's be upfront about that. But I think that the where to start solving those is make sure you're partnering with somebody that has expertise, somebody that's done this for years.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that the new entrances aren't going to do a good job, but if I were going to start shipping to and from Mexico, I would start with a company that's got expertise. That's where we shine. We got 25 years of experience. As I talked to you earlier about, we're masters. We're not practicing anymore. We don't do this for fun. We know what we're doing. So I would start
Right.
number one with a company that's got experience.
Hmm.
Number two, I would ask a lot of questions around safety, security protocols. For example, we're CTPAT certified and validated. We require our Mexican carriers to be the same. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with CTPAT, it's a
Important.
U.S. Homeland Security
Hmm.
agency, and it all came to fruition right after 9/11. It
Hmm.
just makes sure that supply chain is and the chain of custody is clear, and
Hmm.
that everybody in that chain of custody has written procedures and protocols in place around safety and that they're adhering to those. So there's a periodic audit, maybe every 2 years. They come in, ask you some questions. Hey, are you adhering to this? And they want to
Yeah.
show, you have to show them proof that you are. So I would make sure that your service providers are CTPAT validated or certified. If you're having a direct relationship with that Mexican carrier, I would tell you to make sure that that's deep, understand them, know who's who there in terms of the decision makers, develop a relationship with them. If you don't, and you're allowing your U.S. carrier to do that, that's okay. Just make sure that you ask your U.S. carrier about that. Hey,
Yeah.
what do your interchanges look like? What's your stable of Mexican carrier partners look like? Talk to us about procedures and around safety and that. Specific to Mexico, what we require our Mexican carrier partners to do, they have to use toll roads, no free roads. The toll roads are much more heavily patrolled by law
Okay.
enforcement. When we talk to customers, we ask them things like, hey, whenever possible, I know it's not always possible, but whenever possible, try to set up your shipping schedule so that our Mexican carrier partners can transit during daylight hours. When it gets dark, that's when the bad guys come out. And
Hmm.
so we talk to our customer base about, hey, when possible, let's ship in daylight hours. When we talk to our Mexican carriers, we say, hey, when you can, convoy, put 2 or 3 trucks together,
Huh.
have them run
Yeah.
together all the way up to the border, kind of safety in numbers, so to speak. And so we talk to them about this kind of stuff all the time. Security is definitely
Top of
an
mind.
issue in Mexico. Yep.
Yeah. It's
And so
got
I'm
to be
not,
top of mind, right? Hmm.
yeah, and so I'm not going to circumvent that. It is what it is.
Yeah.
I hope the new administration kind of gets a handle on that and things
But
get
you've thought
better.
of everything, right? You've kind of thought of all the different ways that you can think about mitigating that risk for your customers. I mean, I've had a lot of conversations about Mexico, and security is a big thing. And nobody has really given me tangible ways that they're helping their customers except for you right now, which I'm really enjoying because I think these are things that we may not think about going into Mexico. I mean, there's a lot to think about, not just
Yeah.
transportation, but transportation is the key way that you're going to have the capital of those goods move securely and safely to the end consumer. There's a lot of money on the line.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. One I didn't talk about too is we offer what we call armed escorts.
Hmm.
So if it's high value, um, high sensitivity type of product. So think cell phones, SIM chips,
Yeah.
these sorts of items, right? We
Hmm.
we will say, hey, we need 2 loads, and then we'll put an armed escort on the front and the back of that
Hmm.
as they head to the border. So it's yet another service that we offer. It's not
Right.
free, obviously, but it helps add security to make sure, as you mentioned, that the product that leaves Mexico is the exact same product that's
Mhm.
untampered with when it gets to its final
But
destination in the
also it's
U.S.
risk dollars. Right? So
Yes,
no
yeah,
answer, no solution is ever necessarily perfect. It's really about where do you want to spend your risk dollars? Because some
absolutely.
some ways are going to cost you a little bit more than others. Okay. So if you go with the cheaper option or whatever that looks like, what is the risk that you're going to take by doing that? And does that increased cost, whatever that looks like, mitigate that risk to a place where you actually feel better and the capital that's on the line is going to be safe, secure, and get to the end consumer? I mean, it
Yeah.
really just depends on where people are in their risk tolerance, right?
Yeah, no,
But the
absolutely.
fact that you've got options for them to be able to mitigate that and figure out where they want to spend their risk dollars is really the key of how we're going to have success within Mexico and the US. Now, I want to talk to you about providing flexibility, speed, capacity, right, that shippers expect when shipping across border. Can you talk a little bit about the investment that Werner has made to improve operations and capabilities in Mexico? Like, I think when I was doing the research for this episode, you recently opened, I think, a cutting edge cross-dock facility in Laredo, Texas. Why did you do that? What does this investment mean for your customers and for the industry?
Yeah, it's a sizable investment. It took me a bit of time to talk our CEO into spending $8 million to build a new building,
How much?
and 8 million.
Wow. That's a big investment, but
Yeah,
definitely probably worth it.
it's going to be in the long run. It's just coming online now and kind of building momentum now. And we talked about the flexibility. If customers are flexible, we can utilize this facility. It's a 21 door facility. I think 12 or 13 doors are dedicated toward dry, and then we have another 8 or so on the other end that's all temperature or climate controlled.
Hmm.
So I think food products are moving through that
Yeah.
particular area. Like you said, state of the art, cutting edge, very regimented process. We know every trailer that comes in, the trailer number is documented. Every seal that's broke, documented. Every new trailer that the product is loaded on, documented. Every new seal number or any new seal number that's applied, documented. So very, very regimented, but it's necessary to show chain of control and who's in control, who's doing what, and all of those sorts of things. Once customers see it, they actually become pretty open to, oh, okay, when you first introduce the idea that they put up the wall, right? And it's like, oh
Mhm.
boy, yeah, I don't know about this, right?
Right.
Once they do a site visit and see it, they
Mhm.
become much more comfortable with it, and they're seeing it in action. And then they say, okay, well, let's do a few test loads. Once you get past that test load thing, it goes pretty easy, and they understand the dynamics and how it flows, how we're handling those situations.
Mhm.
And it's one of those things that we can do to help. We talked about the northbound, southbound imbalance already, but it's one of those things that helps us augment capacity to our customers, especially during peak periods.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, especially if you've got the cutting edge, technology in there, the cross-dock solution, you've got the cold chain. It's almost like you've thought of everything. So I want to do a site visit at some point. So we're gonna
Yeah,
have to
come
make that
come on
happen.
down. That whole
Um,
facility, by the way, has got probably 15 or 20 cameras in it. It's all digitally
wow.
recorded. It's uploaded to the cloud. It's there
Mm,
forever. It's not like a rolling video that rolls over itself every 4 days or any of that. And
mm,
so if a customer says, hey, you know, I'm not sure all of that product made it out of trailer A and into trailer B,
mhm.
we can pull that video and send that off to them in an electronic file and say, hey,
Hmm.
you can see everything coming off, you can see everything going on. And so
Very
it's
cool.
another way that we've embraced technology. We talked a little bit about how
Yeah.
technology has changed things over
Hmm.
the history of cross-border shipping, and this is one of those technological advances that we take full advantage of.
Awesome. Well, and you kind of shared a little bit of an example, but I'd like you to expand into sort of a case study of how you've worked with a client. What solution did they use? What was the benefit or ROI they saw from working with you? You don't have to name a customer. Just walk us through what that has looked like for them.
Yeah, recently we had a project where we had a customer that basically it was a short-term project for them, but they were basically going to double their normal volumes.
Wow.
And we said, listen, we can't handle all of that on our truckload asset dry side of the business.
Hmm.
But if you allow us some flexibility, this transload facility, if you allow us to intermodal some of that on maybe the less time sensitive moves, or if you allow us to use a broker carrier that will manage, we're still responsible, Werner's responsible for it. But if you allow us the flexibility to be able to use these other modes,
Hmm.
we can take it all for you, make it really easy for you. It's streamlined. You got one carrier to call if there's a problem. You get one set of invoices coming in, not multiple from 5 or 6 different carriers.
Hmm.
And they took us up on that. And so we were able to provide seamless, cross-border transportation solutions. And it came in a number of different ways. It wasn't just all truckload. It was
Right.
done through those other modes that I just mentioned.
Yeah.
And so I think at the end, their ROI is going to be better because we didn't have to implement any peak or premium type of rates
Mm.
to try to fill that need
Mhm.
because they were flexible.
Right.
And I think that's kind of the key to it's going to be the key to success for many shippers out of Mexico going forward as this nearshoring ramps, as we've talked about.
Yeah.
If they become flexible to these other modes, I think they can mitigate or keep their transportation cost in check.
Yeah, and also trusting, again, going back to that trust piece, trusting your partner that they're actually not trying to increase costs. They're actually looking at a way for you to decrease your costs or at least not pay the peak and all of those accessorial charges that do come up sometimes. And that trust piece is critical to when you're going to partner with a transportation company. And it sounds like you are able to come up with ways and have solutions for your customers that really benefit them in a variety of ways that maybe they just haven't thought about or didn't think was a possibility, right? You're sort of opening up doors, opening up opportunities, opening up possibilities of what actually is possible in cross-border transportation. I love to hear that, especially with a company who's been in the industry for so long. So last question I want to ask you, what does the future hold for Werner? Are there any exciting things we can look out for in 2025?
Yeah, well, so let me start with a bigger, broader picture. I think North America, our future is bright.
Hmm.
Um, we're seeing nearshoring, both Canada and Mexico. I think that trend continues.
Yeah.
And as we rely on one another, when I'm talking about countries here, Canada and Mexico, as we rely on one another more heavily, I think that's good for all of us. Speed to
Hmm.
market, we've talked about that. Reoccurring supply chain replenishment, all of that speeds up, which means potentially less empty shelves for us, like we experienced during the pandemic. I mean,
Hmm.
many of us would go to the store and what we wanted to buy
Yep.
wasn't on the shelf, right? I
Hmm.
think a lot of that goes away in the future. We plan on continuing to grow. We see this as an opportunity. We talked about where we think nearshoring is going in the next decade or so. Um, Warner's future and all of the 3 countries here in North America, I think all of us we have a fabulous future ahead of us. I don't think we're going to see the disruptions that they see in many other countries.
Mm.
Europe is no, by the way, I've been to Europe a number of times, love it, but it's an aging society. They're aging. We're young, especially Mexico, very young demographic. If you look at Mexico, I don't know my numbers are going to be exact here, but it'll make the point. Their average age is something like 35 or 40 years old. The
Mm.
average age in the United States is something like 55, 60 years
Mhm.
old. So they're a very young country.
Mhm.
And so labor resources will be available. They've done much better in the last decade or so in terms of education. There's virtually no language barrier. I mean, yes, they speak Spanish, but anybody that's middle class or above in Mexico speaks English. And so there's less of a language barrier than say, China.
Mhm.
And so all of that points to a bright future for North America, and we're ready, we're established, and we're poised. We're ready for this. I mean, we're always thinking about the future. The one thing that I pride myself at Werner, and it's not just me, by the way, it's really the whole entire executive team, is, we're very forward thinking. How do we get ahead of this? How do we try to set ourselves up for potential success in the future? And
Mhm.
it's not always about right now, making a buck right now. It's about how do we get ourselves positioned to help
Yeah.
meet our customers where they're at.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. And thank you for sharing about the future. I mean, I need to take your passion, put it into a bottle, I think, because you are so passionate about what you do and about the industry. And I love that you said that the future is bright. So we know that transportation and logistics are the backbone of the economy. And as the industry changes and we continue to be hit by disruption, strong collaborative partnerships are essential to remain successful. With more than 25 years of experience in cross border transportation, Werner transports more cross border freight to and from Mexico than any other carrier, resulting in nearly $400 million in annual revenue. It is a power partner when it comes to moving freight across international borders, and companies can rely on its comprehensive solutions and state of the art facilities to ensure their cross border transportation needs are met efficiently and effectively. Now, did you have a guess at today's big question? Well, at the top of the show, I asked you, how many inspections does the Werner team carry out every year? Well, it's upward of 60,000. That's an incredible number that shows they're truly committed to their purpose of delivering safe, world-class logistics. Now, if you want to find out more, you can check them out over at werner.com. A massive thanks to Lance for joining me and to the team at Werner for making this episode happen. Lance, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
It's been my pleasure. I've had a lot of fun.